All right, so good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining our Starting Your Wildlife Activities webinar. My name is Avalon Powell, and I am the Event and Marketing Coordinator for Plateau Land and Wildlife. I'll give a little bit of time for other subscribers to join our webinar, but just before we get started, I would like to run through a couple of details. So there are a couple of options for you to submit your questions. We will be saving time at the end of the presentation to address those. You can submit your questions one of two ways. So if you scroll over the Zoom screen, you'll see a toolbar at the bottom. On that toolbar, there is a selection option for Q&A and chat. If you click either one of those options, it's going to open up a separate window where you can type your questions and submit for answers. Again, we will be monitoring those as we go, but we're going to try and save all the answers till the end so we can make sure to get through the entire presentation in a timely manner, especially for those of you that might have a hard stop at 1. Second, this webinar will be recorded. You can go to our event directory on the website, www.plateauwildlife.com. You'll see a tab for our event directory, and on that page, there's also a tab for on-demand webinars. At the end of this webinar, I will be uploading and recording that to our site, but I also plan to send y'all a follow-up email tomorrow morning, and that will include the link to the recording and then also the PDF version of our PowerPoint. So there's no need to take notes. We should be covering this all in this presentation, and you can go back and review at a different time. And today you will be hearing from Tim Milligan. He is our Director of Landowner Services. And Tim, feel free to take it away.
You bet, Avalon. Thanks a bunch. First of all, just want to thank everybody for coming and showing up, spending a little time with us here today. I was looking across the top of this thing, looking for an applause bar. Or an applause button, wishing I could give Avalon a round of applause from everybody here real quick. Y'all don't know how good it feels. I've done a number of these, and if you've done them before, you know that it's important to have somebody help set these things up and to get them started like this in an organized way and go through all the kind of housekeeping stuff so I don't mess it up. So Avalon, thanks a bunch.
Thank you.
No, you bet. So as we get into this thing, I want to make sure everybody knows that, like I said, we will have time for questions, and she'll record them as we go along. If you ask your questions, and I'll be happy to do what I can to answer them. If I don't have an answer, we'll get you an answer. She's going to send you something later on, I think, with my information on it as well, so you can get back in touch with me if you need to. I wanted to say just briefly a little something about myself, just so you know who this guy is that's talking to you if you haven't met me or talked to me yet. I've been with Plateau for about, I think, 13 years now. I started as a technician, as a guy, one of the guys out there filling feeders, treating fire ants, monitoring nest boxes, taking pictures, documenting all these activities, helping people that needed help with their activities, helping them do those, and recording them for Plateau. And so I learned about this from that side of the business and that side of the industry of the actual activities and what you do. Got a real good foundation on what actually needs to be done. Then moved through the different parts of the company, been in the sales part of it for a while here, and basically getting the word out to people, different landowners, doing the seminars and those kind of things. So been with the company for quite a while, watched a bunch of things change, seen all of our worked with, I guess by now it's thousands of customers, probably individually myself, but that I've worked with and had some involvement with at different levels. More importantly than all that, my we're landowners. We have a place outside of Austin in Garfield, towards Bastrop, but eastern Travis County. We've been in wildlife, man. We were in ag first, traditional ag, cows, livestock, the whole 9 yards, doing all of that. Still dabble in it some, but moved into wildlife management when it became the right thing for us to do. And that was about 7 years ago. We've been doing it for about 7 years. I've gone through all these things that we're fixing to talk about, and if you're in wildlife management or you're getting started, I know what it feels like. If you're in it for a while, I know what it feels like. I've done a little bit of all this, been involved in it, had to turn in reports, had to refile applications, had to make up for mistakes I made, things like that. So I'll share some of my experiences and some of those from other landowners as well as we get started. But just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and who I am and why I'm on here talking to you. So briefly, what we're going to cover, just a general kind of overview of the wildlife management program. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. kind of how it works. We'll talk about some do's and don'ts that I like. There's some things that I put up there from the years of hearing from everybody and hearing and my own do's and don'ts and what I advise other people to do and don't do. We'll talk about the activity categories and kind of give some examples in each one, and then some things to consider going forward, resources and help that's out there for you, and then we'll answer your questions. Let's see here. So real simply, I kind of look at this as, this is my kind of statement of what I look at wildlife management as being. It's what I'm doing now instead of raising cows, fixing fences, planting and producing crops and cultivating crops. Wildlife management is what I'm doing instead of those things. Rather than those, it's a different form of ag. It's an alternative that I like, that works for me and works for my family. And the work that I'm doing there is no different than the work I was doing when I was keeping cows and building fences and feeding livestock and producing hay and oats. I think of wildlife, and I think it helps for other people maybe to think of wildlife as a crop. Think of your wildlife and your wildlife habitat as a crop, and then it starts to make sense that, I have to put some work into it. All of y'all at one point in time or, throughout your lives have put work into your ag operation, whether it's ag, timber, whatever it is. It takes work. You can't just put the cows out on the property and leave them alone. You have to do things. Tried that. They end up on the highway. So I think of wildlife as a crop, and it helps make it a little easier for me to understand that that's what I'm doing. And it simplifies things for me a little bit. Now, let's see. So generally speaking, this is the kind of overview. Generally speaking, wildlife management is activity-based. It's not results-based. You just need to do it. And that's what we're getting into here. As you're getting started, hopefully we did, I guess it was 350 new wildlife management plans this past year. We did 350 or so the year before that. I think it was over 400 maybe the year before that. So in the last 3 years, we've had close to 1,000 people or more that have moved into wildlife management just with us. Us doing their plans, and all of y'all, even if you're 2 and 3 years in, those folks are still kind of getting started and getting acclimated and starting to understand what they're doing. So to me, it's a reminder of just do it. It doesn't have to work great. You don't have to be great at it. You don't have to have better songbirds, more butterflies, bigger deer. You just need to do the activities and be able to prove that you did them. Follow a plan. So following a plan helps to increase success. Success is one thing. For me, enjoyment is another. I've got to enjoy this stuff or I'm not going to do it right. I was mentioning to Avalon earlier that I'm a little behind on mine because it's not as fun right now because of all the other stuff that's going on. That's where I may need some help. I may need to have someone help me do it because I've got other priorities and other things I need to do. That's where we can come in for a lot of folks. We can help them with these activities for the things that aren't so much fun. I mentioned I started as a technician. I started as a technician treating fire ants specifically. I was hired on a temporary basis to treat fire ants during the fall when we treat a whole lot of fire ants on a whole lot of properties, because no one wants to treat fire ants and actually have to document it. Write it down, put it on a map, and do it as diligently as we might, or as you might need to be able to prove that you did to the county. So people will hire us to do that. And that's what they hired me to do. That part was not fun for a lot of people and is not fun for a lot of people. So they might hire somebody to do it. It's kind of like mowing your yard. Sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's not. When it's not, like the other day when I really needed something else to do or had something else to do, I needed to have someone else help me mow the yard. Doing the activities is the fun part. It should be what you're doing. Again, and we've talked about it, instead of doing the other stuff. It should be fun. When I do go out there and do things, it is fun with me and my family, and it's something fun and rewarding for us to do. Falling behind can make it hard, less rewarding. Again, I have emphasis on that. It's got to be rewarding to me in some way, or else I wouldn't be doing it. Less rewarding. It can make it more difficult and expensive. Every year we have folks that come to us at the end of the year that say, I didn't do any of this stuff and I need help. That's when it gets a little expensive. Just like neglecting anything else. I was talking to somebody the other day. Sometimes when your car's running the best is when you forget to change the oil. It's easy to do that unless you've had someone that's pounded that into your head that you need to change that oil. Everything's going great. Right now, it's not something that's on everybody's mind, but it needs to be done, and you need to do it and stay up with it to help keep it from becoming difficult or expensive. And you're not in this alone. If we did your plan or if we didn't do your plan, we're here. Plateau is here. You can always call Plateau. You can always call this company, and we will answer your questions. We will help out any way we can. I was making some comments before I started this thing, and I'm a firm believer in, it's not all about us. It's about the people that are in wildlife management. The more people we can help to have a good experience, get a good start, get kicked off right, have a good experience doing this and succeed in it, and have it be fun and rewarding, the more people will want to do it. And in turn, we will end up being successful as a company. We'll maintain and continue to grow like we are. We're doing a lot of things right now, and I'll talk a little bit about it later, but we're doing a lot of things to help new landowners who have recently gotten into wildlife, to help them get started with some discounts on products. And our annual reports are a great way for people to make sure that they're staying up on this stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but you're not in this alone. We're around and we're here if you need us. So now we'll get into the do's and don'ts. This is kind of a fun part. I'm going to blow right through it, hopefully. Try not to go too fast, but I'm going to run through it because these are some things that come on my mind when I start thinking about wildlife management and what I want people to know. And they come from questions that people ask me. So the first one, don't. If you're new in wildlife management, let's say you just filed for 2020, just recently, the appraisal district just got your application, or they just start to look at them after the end of April. Don't wait until you get approved to get started. You told the county, basically, by filing for wildlife, you told them, this is what I'm doing as of January 1. You need to have started your activities. The last thing you want to have happen is for them to actually say, you've been approved, we want to come out and look at the property. And then them come out and you haven't done anything. Now you've been approved and they may deny you because you haven't started your activities. So don't fall into that trap of waiting to get approved before you get started. Every year we have folks that say, well, yeah, I do want to buy your products. I want to buy a water system, or I need to buy a feeder, or yeah, I want to do fire ant treatment, or whatever it may be, and nest boxes maybe. But I don't want to do that until the county's told me, until I know I'm approved. Well, that's just like saying, filing for traditional ag and not putting cows out there. It's the same thing. You assume that you're approved. Don't wait to get approved. If we filed your plan, you're going to get approved. Don't wait to get approved. Don't expect to hear from the appraisal district. They don't always tell you that you're approved. If we didn't file your plan, you may never know, because the appraisal district is not really required to send you anything that says you're approved. Most appraisal districts aren't, and a lot of appraisal districts don't. The reason being is that you're really going from one form of ag to another. It's really no different than me telling the county that I'm going to run cows instead of running goats. And if I do that, they don't have to tell me I'm approved. I'm still in ag. Nothing's changed. I've just changed the way I'm using my property. So you may not ever hear about an approval. If we did your wildlife management plan, you'll hear from us. We follow up with these, and we continue to hound and harass these poor appraisal districts until we know that your application was approved. Because that's our responsibility. That's what you paid us to do. So, but don't expect to hear from them. If you did with us, you'll hear from us. But don't expect to hear from the appraisal district. Don't just do the minimum. I can't say this enough. We all know, if you got into this, and if you went to one of our seminars, we emphasize this all the time. Don't just do the minimum. You only have to do 3 activities. I can get away with doing food, shelter, and water. But if I do that, if I only do those 3 activities, water, a feeder, and nest boxes, and some of my nest boxes fall off the trees one year, and at the end of the year, the county says, I send them a report, and it doesn't have enough on it. I run the risk of losing my ag exemption, losing my wildlife exemption. If I'm doing 2 or 3 other things, so I'm doing 4 or 5 different activities, if something happens and I don't get around to filling those feeders, or maybe I didn't take any pictures of the fire ant treatment that I did, if I've got 4 or 5 activities in the box, then if one of them doesn't work out, I'm still okay. We do 6 or 7 things every year on our property. We'll talk about those in a minute. And I'm pretty much, I kind of believe that if the appraisal district, when they look at my report, they realize that, he's got to screw up on 4 of those in order for us to have anything for him to look at. So don't just do the minimum. Don't fail compliance by performing fewer than 3 activities in a calendar year. So compliance means that I did at least the minimum 3 activities. Don't do less than 3. So I said, just, in the earlier slide, I said, don't do the minimum. Here I'm saying, just whatever you do, don't do less than 3. I can't tell you, I'm sure there are people that, maybe just did 2 activities. And well, that's all I got around to. Well, you run the risk now of losing your ag exemption and losing your favorable property tax valuation, your taxes going way up, or at least, and having to fight that with the county. So don't ever do fewer than 3 activities in a calendar year. If you come to the end of the calendar year, come to the October, November timeframe, and you've only done 2 activities on the property, find another one to do, call us, get help. Don't let that happen. There's no reason for it. Every once in a while, I have a landowner that will call that will say, I'm in ag and I didn't file my application. And so I've lost my ag exemption because I didn't file my application. That's kind of akin to not doing 3 activities. If you didn't file the application, nobody can help you. If you didn't do the activities, at least the minimum, no one can really help you. So don't think that you have to do everything in your plan. So if we did your plan, it's probably, and any plan should be well done. It should have more than just the minimum number of things in it. It should have examples and guidance and instruction and recommendations for different things that you may not necessarily be planning on doing right now, but you may want to do into the future. Maybe bigger projects, maybe things that that you really anticipate doing, but you've changed your mind and you're going to do something else. Don't think that you have to do everything that's in your plan. You have to do a minimum of 3 activities. So the different categories that are in your plan, you have to choose 3 of those and do something in each of those categories. But you don't, let's say your plan has all 7 of them filled out. You've got recommendations in all 7 of those activity categories. You don't have to do all 7 of those things if that's the case. You can pick the 3 or 4 or 5 that you want to do every year. Don't think that you can only do what is in your plan. So there are a lot of qualifying activities. And as you go along, sometimes you realize that, I want to do something that may not be in my plan. One year we decided to strip mow instead of doing brush piles, or instead of doing bird houses. We decided to mow the front pasture and mow strips in it as supplemental shelter. That's a qualifying activity. I just need to be prepared to explain that to the county to make sure they understand it. Sometimes when you do that, if you're going to change and something's kind of a big wholesale change, let's say I'm going to go from my feeders that I'm using for food to disking that I'm using is my supplemental food. And the county has gotten used to seeing these feeders, and that's an easy thing to understand. Is I'm filling feeders every year as my supplemental food, and I want to change over to disking. I might want to write that into my plan and resubmit my plan, update my plan so the county knows what I'm doing. That way, if they do ever come out to my property, they're not looking for a feeder. They're looking for some place where I've dished or planted a crop or something like that for supplemental food. So those are things to consider. And again, I know you're going to have questions about this stuff. And if you do, ask them. Feel free to contact me later and ask about those. Now we get into the fun part, the do's. So those are the don'ts. Don't make some mistakes. Don't do the minimum. Don't cut yourself short. Don't overburden yourself. I didn't mention that one. Don't let this be overwhelming. I can't tell you a number of times that I tell people that our biologists, their job is this is about the plan stuff, about everything in your plan and only what's in your plan. I'm going to go over that real quick. Our biologist's job is to write you the best plan you can possibly get. And any biologist should write you a plan that gives you lots of different recommendations. Sometimes that can be overwhelming. Their job is to write the best plan you can possibly write. Our job, the sales team, the region managers here, Cameron, our account manager, and our biologist, once you've gotten your plan, is to make sure you're not overwhelmed by this thing. Sometimes I say, we got you into this, we'll get you out. It doesn't have to be difficult. Oh, the last don't hesitate to ask for help. That's where I was going there. Always feel free to ask for help. That's why we're here. Do have fun. If this wasn't fun, I wouldn't be doing it. So do enjoy yourself. Do have fun with it. If it's not fun, ask us. If you're not enjoying it and you're not getting some reward out of it, let's figure out what we can do to maybe change up the activities into something that you do enjoy a little more. When I first started with the company, I ran around in the sales into things. I ran around and visited with some of our landowners out in the hill country. And I ran into a nice lady who, she wasn't one of our landowners. We had done some work on her property. I think we had either done some fire ant treatment or something, but we didn't do her plan. But she was one of our customers, and I called her, and said she was having trouble, and would I come out and visit with her? So I went out, and she just told me, she said, Tim, I think it's harder than what I was doing before. I'm not enjoying it. And I asked her what she was doing, and the plan that she had gotten from someone it was prescribed burns and big brush management projects and a bunch of other stuff that just wasn't what she wanted to do. And so we dialed it back, redid her plan for her, and got it into things that she enjoyed. Bird surveys and fire ant treatment and bird houses and things that she could manage herself and were more fun for her. She lived on the property, but she could do those things, but she couldn't do prescribed burns herself, and she couldn't do the big brush management herself. It became fun, and she's still in wildlife management and still enjoying it, rather than going back into traditional ag and having a cattle tenant or having someone else, that she had to be obligated to help keep up her ag. So anyway, it's kind of a success story, and why, to me, it ought to be fun. Do get started early. Don't wait. The earlier you can get started, the better. The earlier you get started, the less stressful it is. So we did well over 100 2020 wildlife management plans in last year. So early plans that we wrote for people that didn't get filed until January, but those people were ready. They had their plan, they had their biologist recommendations, they had a plan, and they could get started early. They could get started in January. They could get started the year before to start their activities, so they could ease into it and not have to go out there and just start putting everything out all at once and doing everything all at once. If you wait too long, you have to do it in a rush. And just like me at Christmas and any birthday and any other holiday, which Mother's Day is coming up, wait too long, I end up spending more than I ought to, or end up stressing over it more than I should. It works the same way. So do get started early. That's a good piece of advice. Do more than is required. We talked about that earlier. Got a landowner in San Antonio that's got a small piece of property that's terribly valuable. And technically he could get away with putting 3 birdhouses out on his property for supplemental shelter, saving him a ton in taxes. And I remember expressing to him, look, please don't just put 3 nest boxes out, 3 birdhouses, because you don't want to be sitting in that group of people. If something were to happen and one of those falls off, you don't want to be sitting in that group of people in that appraisal review board and have to explain why you could only put 3 birdhouses out to save you X number of dollars in taxes. So don't do just a minimum, do a little more than is required. So for instance, on our property, technically we need 10 birdhouses on our property, 1 per 5 acres. I've got 15 or so out. We do fire ant treatment more often than we need to. We do more surveys, a few more surveys than we actually have to qualify. But it's because I don't want to do just what's required. I want to do more, and we get more out of it if we do. So the more you do, the more reward you're going to get out of it. We'll talk about that a little more too. Again, it's just like any other crop. It's like any other crop, any other project. The more you put into it, the more you'll get out. And I strongly believe that. And if that's not happening, if you're putting a lot into it and you're not getting some reward out of it, then that's where, again, you need to call us. You need to figure out, maybe there's something. Planting native grasses is a good example. Sometimes planting food plots, sometimes you just don't need to do it. It's a wrong thing to be doing, and you can keep doing it until you get frustrated and think, and then you don't do it and you end up slipping up and not doing enough activity. So do get organized and prepared. Talk about that more in a minute. The wildlife management plan, the annual report, we'll talk about tools, have your tools, have the things that you need, just like you're planning a trip or just like planning anything else. Have the things that you need to make that trip successful. Going fishing or something, or going hunting or whatever it may be. You have a list of things that you need to take with you. I go way overboard and take a lot of things I probably don't need, but I'm organized and prepared. So whether I catch a bunch of fish or not, it's a successful trip that I don't stress out about. It's kind of the way I look at my wildlife management. Prepare early. If I know I'm going to be doing a little bit of brush management, I've got loppers, I've got the poison, whatever it may be. If I know I'm going to be doing fire ant treatment this year, I go ahead and I've got my fire ant bait. It's set aside. I'm ready to go. So I'm prepared with the things I need to do, and I'm ready to document it. Do keep good records. Speaking of document, do keep good records. That's where if you don't hear me say anything, remember that if you don't document what you did on your property as it pertains to wildlife management, it's like you never did it. I remember when I started here treating fire ants, Steve Parker, who runs the products and services department here, one of the first things he told me was, Tim, if you don't take pictures of what you're doing on this landowner's property, it's like you were never here. So do keep good records. Take a lot of photos, document what you did, be able to prove it. Look at it like something you were going to show to your friends or show to your family. I want to be able to tell my family what I did on the property. I want to be able to tell my friends this is what I did. And if they ever want to see it, I want to be able to show it to them. So that's where I keep good records, dubious records of the things that I do. They don't have to be burdensome. Find some tools. I use Google Drive and Keep and notebooks and all kinds of other stuff, and we can help you with some of that though. But keep good records. It's important. The better records you keep, the less stressful this whole thing will be. Do take a lot of photos. Photos are great records, obviously. No one can argue with photos. If I took photos, it proves that I was there doing what I said I was doing. So do take a lot of photos. Everybody's got a camera. It's pretty easy to take photos. Take those photos, keep them in a file, and they can help you tell a story at the end of the year if someone ever asks. The annual report that you get oftentimes is a report. A lot of counties ask for these annual reports. We do, going to be close to 1,000 this year. We did a little over 800, I think, this year, 800, 900 this past year. It's kind of like we're an accountant for folks where we're doing their taxes. People send us all their stuff and we compile it into a report for the county. A lot of that is photos. It's evidence of what they did. I can tell the county all day long, this is what I did. But if I'm sending them photos, they know I did it. I remember when Travis County asked me for our report this year, she actually told me on the phone, she said, please don't just send in the report. Please send some photos with it. I do every time, but I was in a little bit of a pinch, and she was just reminding me, if you just send the report without any documentation telling me what you did, that could raise some questions. If you send some photos with it, nobody's going to have any questions. So anyway, take a lot of photos. Think about your annual report. We just talked about that. Keep that annual report on your mind. Whether you're in a county that asks for it or not, or whether you think you're going to need one or not, I always do an annual report, whether I think the county is going to ask for it or not. It's a receipt for me of what I did that year. Whether I did the activities or somebody else did them, it documents everything that I did on my property that year. This year, when I did my annual report, I went back and looked 5 years back and looked at the things I did then and thought, wow, I'm still doing that and it's still working. And I was able to see what I did. If I hadn't done an annual report 5 years ago, I would have no idea. I wouldn't remember that I actually did that same activity 5 years ago, and these are the results I got from it then. So keep that annual report on your mind. Keep on your mind the fact that you're probably going to need to prove this stuff to someone. That's good advice right there. Expect the property to be inspected. So there you go. Expect to be inspected. That's, another piece of good advice. Most counties don't. Hayes County, I think, does, and some other counties around here do. Most counties don't inspect the property. Sometimes they do at random, and they'll come out and they'll want to inspect the property. I advise everybody just expect to be inspected. Expect that your county's at some point going to want to come out and see what you did. And so if you're doing that and you're thinking that way, you should never have any problem. I'm always expecting someone. I look at it like I'm always expecting one of my friends to want to go out to the farm. I've told them all I've got a feeder, I've got a blind, I've got all this stuff that I've done. We've got a barn. I've told them we've done all this. If they ever decide to come out there, I want to have done it. If one of my buddies wants to go out there and see and go hunting or go, fishing or goofing off or whatever, I want them in the back of their mind to think, oh yeah, he told me about this, this, and this, and it's actually here. So anyway, that's the way I look at it. Expect to be inspected. Expect your property to change. Expect to see some changes. Expect to see, brush issues where you didn't have them before, native grasses where you didn't have them before. Expect some change and be ready and be okay with that. Learn, we can help you adapt and know that, your property is going to change a little bit. You're going to have different species of animals on it. You're going to have more predator and more prey. You're going to have, a little bit of everything. So expect that change and be looking for that change and recognize it. And that's part of my documentation every year is kind of writing down the things that I thought changed about my property, whether it was, hey, mesquites are growing back up over here. And, the area that we used to keep as a coastal pasture that used to stay perfectly clean has changed a lot. It's much more diverse now, but it also needs some management. So I'm paying attention to those changes. So just do expect it to change and do expect to get some reward out of your wildlife valuation, your wildlife management. Expect to get some reward out of it. Valuation, hopefully for y'all, the wildlife management exemption, wildlife valuation, exchangeable terms. But do expect to get some reward out. Expect that that when you're doing this, you ought to see something from it. I feel like, all of us want to get, would love to get something out of the property that we own. For me, it's more enjoyment for my family. It's a more diverse, more beautiful property, those kind of things. That's my reward. Seeing turkey for the first time in 50 years was part of my reward. Seeing a bobcat with my daughter one time, those kind of things. Those are my reward. Those are the rewards that I get out of what we're doing. Do make it easier on yourself. So don't think that this has to be hard. It shouldn't be hard, shouldn't be difficult, shouldn't be overwhelming. Make it easier on yourself. We can help with that. I'm going to talk a little bit about us right here, then we'll get into the activities. Get help if you need it. It's okay. It's okay if you don't do any of these activities. It's okay. We do everyone's activities or all the activities for a lot of folks. We do part of some people's activities. And some people, we don't do any of theirs. Don't think that it's not okay for someone else to do this stuff for you, whether you're hiring someone else, hiring us, getting help. We have products and services that are designed to help people have an easier time with wildlife management. You can see some examples of them here. We're having a product promotion, I think, starting next week. We've had a couple of them here. If you call one of the guys, call your region manager, call Cameron, the account manager at the office. Call any of them and ask them about the products that we have. They can tell you about them. If you're on our email list, you'll probably get an email about the promotion that's coming out about the different products that we have and some discounts on those. The design of that is to help people get started, get started successfully, and give them a little bit of a break to help make that happen. The last thing we want to have happen is for people to delay these things and not get the things they need, or to have a hard time once they're in wildlife management. So we try to make these things a little easier to get to. Same with our services, whether it's bird surveys or us treating fire ants or treating prickly pear, which you can see here, or doing any kind of survey for you, or the annual report that I talked about, the annual reports that we do. Those annual reports are a great way. We're actually, I think an email went out today about our annual reports. Those are a great way to get some help staying on top of your services. One of the best ways to stay on top of this thing is to have us kind of help you through it throughout the year. When you sign up for an annual report, we actually send reminders and communicate with you throughout the year. If you take advantage of that service fully, if you actually send us your documentation as we're going along, so they send these reminders asking for documentation. If you do something on your property and you send it to us, David and the annual report team and Alec, they will actually tell you that, hey, that's a great activity and this is great documentation, or you know what, that's a good activity. I need some more documentation of it. Why don't you send me a couple more pictures? Or maybe if you did it this way, it would qualify, be a little easier to understand. So we can help you get more out of the things that you're doing throughout the year just by signing up for that annual report, which is it's a cool service, much more than just filling out the report itself. We do that as well, and we submit it to the counties. We take care of all that for you, but it is kind of an ongoing reminder service, having someone tell you that, hey, you need to be doing this stuff, and we'll look at your activities as they go. Okay, now we get into the good stuff. That was all the do's and don'ts and kind of how to get started. Now we get into, I'm going to talk about each activity just a little bit and how they work, and give some examples of each, and then documenting each one and kind of give you some examples. So as you're getting into this and doing it, you'll know what to think about. So there's 7 activity categories. Here's habitat control, game population management, brush management, riparian management, all these different things you can do. One, your wildlife management plan from Plateau will have pretty strategic, pretty in-depth recommendations of how to do these things and how to document them. But an idea here is, if I'm doing game population management, I'm removing some deer. I'm either hunting or trapping or whatever. I'm removing animals from my property. That's a form of habitat control. I want to take pictures. I want to document that, the date that I did it, the activity that I did. Whenever I go out to my property and do anything that's wildlife management oriented, I write it down. I make a note. I've started using Google Keep. It's an easy way to make notes. And then you can send them right to a document and put that into your report at the end of the year, or send it to us and we'll do it. Anything I do, I take some notes. I describe what I did, the date that I did it, and why I thought it made a difference at my property, kind of thing. It's not overwhelming, not difficult. And some of this stuff, I just take photographs as I'm doing it. And then I have those photographs to fall back on later in the year. So any kind of thing like that. Brush management, the thing to consider there, if I'm doing brush management, before and after photos are an easy way to describe that to the appraisal district on a report, or to yourself later on. That was one of the things I looked at in my 5-year report. So I looked back 5 years and I saw the brush management we did, and I could see from my pictures this year what had grown back from what we had done. I knew it was growing back, but it was hard to recognize the actual extent of how much it had grown back. When I looked at those pictures from 5 years ago, the before pictures and then the after pictures of that year, to see exactly what we had done, it gave me a real good example of, hey, this is actually becoming an issue I need to address. The regrowth is actually, even though it might not look that bad, it's coming back pretty strong. So that was a good way of doing that. Before and after pictures are a great way of documenting habitat control. It's probably the best way of documenting brush management and any kind of other, reseeding of native grasses and those kind of things. That reseeding of native grasses, documenting what you did, documenting the fact that you planted the seeds, keeping receipts for the seeds, those kind of things. I mentioned receipts. I'm going to say this real quick. Receipts are great. We'll get into feeders and other stuff like that in a little bit. Receipts are great, but let's say I've got $1,000 worth of receipts for protein, but no pictures. But I've got $1,000 worth of receipts, and I put those in my report. County's probably not going to question me. They're not out to get anyone. They're not looking to get anyone. But if push comes to shove, they don't know if I took that protein and sold it somewhere, if I took it to the deer lease, or what I did with it. If I've got a photo of that feeder being filled on my property, there's no way for anyone to question it. So here's the next one here: erosion control, pond and tank construction, dam repair, things like that. Again, take photographs. Take photographs and document what you did. I've got an erosion control area on our farm, and again, erosion control activities are 10-year activities. I can count that as an activity. I've rebuilt an old kind of culvert area that had blown out. We kind of reshaped it and stacked a bunch of brush and debris in it to slow the water down as it comes through, because it was eroding the area real bad. I took some before pictures of how bad the erosion was. I took some after pictures after we had fixed it and put all the debris down in it. And then each year I go down there and I take a couple more different pictures of it from different angles to show that it's still there, it's still working, it's still doing what it's supposed to do. I make a couple notes about how it's actually collecting silt behind it. It's actually backing up and it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's slowing down the water and slowing that erosion. I do that each year. I don't want to send them the same picture every year for 10 years. It's not that first picture that matters. It's the fact, that's why you get a 10-year credit. It's the fact that you maintained it and you've taken a look at it and you've actually, fixed it if it needed it. If that thing blows out, I've got to go and fix it again. So documentation of your activities again. Lots of good examples of erosion control. documenting those with photographs and notes of what you did, when you did it, why you did it. That's the important part. Predator control. This again is probably the perfect example of why you need to take photographs. We got rid of a lot of hogs in the last couple of years, and we've treated a lot of fire ants. If we didn't take photographs and document well what we did, no one would ever know we did it, because we certainly don't, have a bunch of dead hogs laying around, and nobody can tell there's, honestly, you probably can't tell there's fewer fire ants. Sometimes you can, different times of year, and if I'm treating consistently, I can tell. But if somebody goes out there, they'll find a fire ant mound, and somebody that doesn't know what they're looking at or talking about might think that, well, you didn't treat fire ants because you still got fire ants. We all know that's not true, but if you document what you did, you document that you went out there, you document, so we treat fire ants all year long. 1 or 2 times a year, the kids and I will go out there and they'll walk a particular pasture and they'll treat fire ants in that pasture, and we'll take some photographs while they do it. The hogs, if we're hunting hogs, we take photographs when we actually dispatch of a hog. So we have some documentation. So I send a report to the county that says, we got rid of 6 hogs this year, and here's pictures of them. So we can prove that we did it. I'm not just telling them that I did it. And that way, no one ever has any questions. Again, they're usually not going to, I don't want it to sound like the county's out to get you. They're not. They want to assume everybody's doing exactly what they're supposed to do. But let's say I did only have 3 activities, and one of them was, fire ant control, and I didn't have any evidence of it. I could run into an issue. That could be a problem if I didn't have any documentation at all. Again, one of the great reasons to have us do an annual report, one of the great reasons to have us fill out, different forms and things like that for you, is that we know what we're looking at. So we'll never send an annual report in saying that somebody did fire ant treatment when there's no evidence to back it up. Before it ever goes to the county, we'll stop it and go, hey, we need a couple photographs. We need some pictures of the activities that you did. It's great that you did those. I need some documentation. Every year, towards the end of the year or towards April, when these annual reports are due, I hear David and Alec, and I see all the emails and the conversations that go back and forth of them practically begging people, please send me some photographs. Send me something to substantiate I know you did them, and everybody believes you that you did them, but those photographs are what make it easy to prove and keep those questions from coming up, because our job is to make sure that the report that we send to the county for you is going to pass muster, or the report that or even if it's not going to the county, if we just did the report for you, our job is to make sure that that you didn't prove it well enough, or you're not doing enough of that, or whatever the case may be. So that's part of the good in that service. Supplemental food, great example of, again, documentation and not having to be great at what you do, but doing it. Supplemental food, any kind of, grazing management, moving cows back and forth, food plots where they're appropriate, east of 35 pretty much, feeders and mineral supplementation. Well, my son's taking some bird seed and a deer block out to our property here in the next few days. And when he does, he'll put it on the ground. He'll put the deer block in the feeder. He'll fill the feeder out there, and he'll take photographs of what he did. And he'll document the date he did it, the time, how much time he spent there, those kind of things. It's the same stuff we did, that our technicians do. If our technicians go out and fill one of these feeders or this quail system on the right side, we take photographs of what we do and we document what we did. We write on a log sheet how long we spent out there doing it, what we saw. I went back and looked through some of my old log sheets and some of the old, it's kind of fun because I had to have some fun doing this stuff. Notes about game trails and animals that I saw while I was there and whatever else. You don't have to do all that, but it's fun to do it because then you get it's more than just filling a feeder. So while you're out there filling a feeder, see what's going on around that feeder. Maybe put a camera on it, that kind of thing. But again, filling those feeders, your obligation is to fill them. Get a feeder out there. If you're doing supplemental food, get a feeder of some kind that qualifies for your species. Fill it a few times a year. Document that you've done it. Be able to prove what you've done. And again, just be able to have some evidence in case somebody asks. So supplemental food, supplemental water, same. Some of this stuff's redundant, I know, but same story. Second verse is document what you've done. Go out and take some photographs. I can put that water system out there, but if I don't have any proof that it's actually functioning and has water in it, I really, I haven't done anything. Water, the act of putting water on your property is not what qualifies you. It's the act of proving that the water is working and functioning and providing water for wildlife. So I can say I put a water table out there. This is a Plateau water. It's a water table that we make, a little water collection system for wildlife. Again, designed to make this stuff easy. You don't have to do much with it, but you need to go out there a couple, 2 or 3 times a year, take some photographs of that pan. And if it's not working or if it's out of water, put some extra water in it and document that you did that. Write down that you did those things. If you're doing your own, like a trough modification, building a ramp in and out of a trough, stacking rocks to make it easy for wildlife to get in and out of it. If you're doing those things, or spring enhancement where you fenced off a spring area, maybe planted some native plants around the spring to make it more healthy. If you're doing those things, document what you did before and after photographs, and then document that you're maintaining it, that you're actually just doing it. Again, like a lot of these activities, just doing them is not, putting a feeder out on my property doesn't qualify me. Filling that feeder and keeping some food in it for wildlife, supplementing their food is what qualifies me. So just keep that in mind, that the act of doing it. I've got numerous stories of people that, well, I put birdhouses on my property. And 5 years later, when you talk to them, well, I put those birdhouses out. Well, it's not putting the birdhouses out to count, it's checking them. So just keep that in mind. And as you're doing your activities, as you're checking those things and monitoring, make sure you're documenting. Same thing, birdhouses, strip mowing, strip disking, any of that, building brush piles, any of that kind of stuff. Document that you did it. And again, remember, it's the activity. It's not the action, the actual action or the actual act of putting a birdhouse on a tree. It's the activity of checking it a couple times a year, making sure it's not full of wasps, making sure it's not full of rodents or something like that. Being able to prove that you provided a cavity for the birds. Doing what they're supposed to. If you're building brush piles, if you're, I'm hearing that my internet connection is not great. I hope y'all still got me.
I can still hear you, Tim. It
Okay,
was
thanks.
up there for a quick minute, but you're back on.
All right, cool. Sorry. So, any of this kind of stuff, just make sure that you're documenting the activities, make sure you're, keeping good records. But just know that it's the activity that counts. Strip mowing is a great example of that. I had a landowner one time who was doing strip mowing on his property, and he had mowed these strips in a pasture, and then spring had come and it rained and all the grass had come back up. And when the county came out to look at the property, there's no way to tell he had mowed. There's no way to tell he had ever mowed those strips in that pasture. It was a great
Tim, it did break up on your audio. I apologize, guys. Hopefully we can get back connected in a moment. Oops. So sorry, guys. We're trying to get Tim connected back here. The internet seems like it's gone down, but hopefully this is just a quick fix. Please be patient. It will just be a couple of moments. And for those of you that did join us late, I can see we have a couple of questions that were submitted. We are going to address those here at the end. We're just saving them so Tim can get through the presentation, and we'll be sure to address all of those. If you did not hear at the beginning, you can submit your questions one of two ways. If you scroll over the Zoom screen, there is a little toolbar that will open up at the bottom of your screen for Q&A and chat.
Avalon, are you there?
Yes, I can hear you fine, Tim.
I'm sorry. Do we want to keep going with this thing? I apologize. I don't know what happened there.
Oh yeah, we're good to go. I was just letting everybody know, for those of them that had joined late, how they could submit their questions. I had seen a couple that had come through, and I didn't want them to think maybe we had disregarded them. We will be answering those at the end.
All right. And where am I on time? I'm trying to get through. I'm sorry. We've got 15 minutes. So I'm trying to get through this thing. I know people have things to do. I appreciate all the time y'all are spending. I'm sorry about that little interruption. We'll continue, and I'll get through this stuff real quick, and then we can get on to the questions. The census activities, again, documenting what you did. You can have somebody like us. Yeah.
And we can't see your screen. Just be sure to share screen real quick.
Let's see if I can figure out how. Hang on, I'm trying. There it is.
No worries.
Are we on?
Yes, I can see your screen now. Beautiful.
Go here. Come on. All right, everybody. I apologize. That was kind of rough. Again, census activities, same thing holds true. Document your activities, document what you did. Census activities, basically it's writing down and documenting the things that what you did, whether it's a camera survey, whether it's someone like us doing bird surveys or spotlight counts, having some documentation to do it. We help with a lot of these. We do a lot of spotlight counts, a lot of bird surveys, a lot of camera surveys, those kind of things. Census counts can be a great thing to do for your property because while wildlife management's not activity based, it's nice to know if it's working or not. And a census count can help you understand that. Any kind of survey, any kind of census counts. We do blind counts where we sit in they sound weird, blind counts. We do stand counts where we sit in a deer stand or sit in a blind of some kind and document the animals that we see and just make a long list. Be happy to talk to anyone about that activity and kind of how that works. There's some criteria around all this. Our biologists here can also answer questions about those. So some things to consider. We're going to wind this down and get to the end and try to get to your questions. Tools, timing, action, and assistance. Tools, lots of different tools for wildlife management. The better the tools you have, the better plan you have, the better you'll do, the more rewarding it'll be. Log sheets, have a calendar, your phone, your GPS can be helpful. Maps, our plans come with maps. You can get extra maps, you can blow up maps, you can do all kinds of stuff. Using maps to help you with your wildlife management works great. Log books, calendars, again, all kinds of notes. Keep your receipts, keep photographs, keep all those things in a folder. So if at the end of the year, you can hand them all to us and we can put them into an annual report for you if you don't want to complete it yourself. So all of that stuff, all those notes, all those calendar entries, log sheets, whatever they are, can go into that annual report to not only substantiate and provide evidence of what you did, but also to prove it, to remind yourself of what you did in prior years. That to me is the most important part of it. Counties are going to either ask for them or they're not. And if they ask for them, you have to submit them. And remember, if you do submit that to the county, and when we submit it to the county, sometimes that's the only thing they will ever see. So that actual wildlife management annual report is one of the most important things you can do. But for me, it's one of the most important things I can do for myself because it allows me to look years back and see what did I do on my property and what were the results of it. Otherwise, I would really not have much of a way of documenting that. So here's some examples of log sheets. We have these on our website where you see the website up there. It's on the /forms. We can help direct you to them if you need them. Those are log sheets that we've created. They come with your plan. Some people want more of them. Some people didn't get our plan. They like to have our log sheets. They help you document this stuff. We can certainly help you in that regard. If we did your plan, you've got one of these in there. It's a timing for wildlife management activities. Again, if you don't come back to this webinar for any reason, go look it up later online and find this page and copy this. It's a great information about the right times of year to do certain things, when things work best. That to me it's a valuable thing to know, whether this is a good time of year for me to shred or whether it's a good time for me to treat prickly pear or treat fire ants or whatever it may be. So this can be a very helpful document. And then the action you take. Remember the 7 activity categories. You want to be active in those categories. You want to be active in your management. Love that picture. You want to take action. You want to do something and be active in your management. Like we mentioned earlier, if you've been in traditional ag, farming, ranching, raising livestock, growing crops, you obviously had to put some work into it. Think of wildlife the same way. Think of your wildlife as a crop and do these things just like you would feeding cows, fixing fences and building roads and plowing fields and whatever else. Do these activities in place of those and you'll feel good about what you're doing. Then assistance. Our resources, you can always refer back to us, refer to your wildlife management plan, refer to our website, sign up for our posts and our newsletters. Make sure we have your email address and you're on our email list and you'll get our newsletters. You'll get our Plateau Post, which is a very informative thing that we put out, another type of newsletter. And then, our promotions, whether it's, promotions for products that you need, annual reports that you might need, and help with documentation, help with planning, help with refiling, those kind of things. We'll be able to communicate better with you if you're on our email list. But keep that in mind and just use us as a resource. We really want that. Again, I'm a strong believer that if we're doing this right, if we're helping people do it well, it'll all come back too. People will have better experiences. They'll talk more about their experience in wildlife management, and in turn, we'll benefit. Plateau will benefit from it, and Plateau landowners will benefit from it. The better experience we're all having, the easier this gets for everyone else. The more receptive counties are, the more they look forward to seeing these wildlife management plans. So remember, we're here. Remember, you're one of your resources. So just summing it up, a good plan makes for wildlife, makes for good wildlife, makes it fun and rewarding. Proper timing will improve results. It will. Do it at the right time. Things will work better. Don't wait too late. Always works better. Inspect what you expect. Is it working? Take a look at what you're doing throughout the year. Ask us. Let us, if you, like I said, if you sign up for an annual report, you'll know, because we'll let you know throughout the year whether this is working or not, whether what you're doing seems productive, whether it's qualifying, whether it's actually good for your property, those kind of things. Use the tools, calendars, cameras, checklists, those kind of things. Use what you know to make good decisions. So use us, use what you've learned in your wildlife management plan, use the people that you know here that can help you to make better decisions for your property so this whole thing works better. Look for little rewards and go forward with confidence. I have to tell myself all that time, because sometimes the stuff that you're doing out there, you just don't know if it's working or if it's having any impact or not. But when I'm sitting in a blind one day, watching everything run across, and all of a sudden I see some little ears sticking out of the grass, and it ends up being a bobcat, and my daughter and I get to sit there and watch that bobcat. That wasn't a little reward. That was a big reward. But the little rewards are seeing the more diverse wildlife and seeing things grow back and those kind of things. To me, those are little rewards, and they tell me that I'm doing a good job. What you're doing is worth it, regardless of how big or small your property it is. Chances are it's working and it's worth it. It's worth it to something out there. If I go out there right now and I put out a little bit of water anywhere on my property, something's going to benefit from it. So whatever I do is worth it. So feel good about what you're doing. If you ever have questions, call us. Remember that we've got a group of companies to help you too. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we do have a family of companies to help you. We've got a real estate company. We've got a law firm, Braun and Gresham, who are the best in the industry. They're incredible to help landowners with, other more important items like estate planning and conservation easements and condemnation, which is a big thing right now. But Braun and Gresham, that family of attorneys, just incredible people to work with. But we're more than just a wildlife company. We do hundreds of ag applications every year, just so y'all know that. And when you're talking to people that are in this kind of in our industry, in our field, not everybody's into wildlife management. Some people may want to keep their property in ag. I talked to someone yesterday who got turned down because they filled their ag application out wrong. We charge very little just to fill out an application and file it for people. And it's basically like having an accountant do your taxes. We're not going to fill it out wrong. If it doesn't qualify, we're going to tell you. If for some reason you're going to lose your ag exemption by turning that report in, we're going to tell you before we ever send an ag application or a wildlife management plan or anything else for you. So use us as a resource. I want to thank you, Avalon. I know I've gone over my time limit. I'm sorry. I appreciate everybody spending a little time with us here. Let's get on to the questions, and hopefully I've done y'all some good.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. We've got lots of good questions. I know one of these attendees has to get off by noon, so I'm going to ask hers first. We were talking about, we were talking about strip disking before we got cut off there.
Yeah.
Do you mind just wrapping or coming back to that really quick?
Yeah. So strip disking, the way that works, and every property is a little different. The amount that you might need to do, that kind of thing, to qualify, those kind of things. It's a good question for the biologist and maybe in your plan. But basically what that is taking an area that maybe just, an old cultivated field, like an old coastal field, and disking strips in it. So using a plow to break that ground up. Anytime you break up the ground, something new is going to grow. I had a great example of a property one time where a guy did some disking on his property. He had this pasture down below with a bunch of little oak trees in it, and it was nothing but KR blue stem. Old grass is no good for anything. It was just overgrown with that yellow grass. He went down there and just disked some kind of random paths through all those trees, and bluebonnets came up. He had no idea he had bluebonnets on the property. They'd owned it for 2 years. The bluebonnets had never bloomed because the grasses had covered them all up. So strip disking is it's technically a supplemental food activity, because when you do break the ground up, when you disc it, meaning plow it or whatever you want to call it, when you plow the ground up, weeds are going to grow, and those weeds are food to small wildlife, deer. If you notice, anytime you see a newly plowed field, a lot of times, there's little animals, the deer will come out and eat whatever weeds are growing. So usually it's about a third of an area. So let's say my front 30-acre pasture, I want to do strip disking in it. I'm going to disc a strip. I'm going to break up the ground. I'm going to disc a couple strips. I'm going to move over 3 or 4. I'm going to disc a few more. I'm going to move over 3 or 4. And that's just if I'm doing it in kind of a uniform way. You can just kind of meander through an area. And at the end of the day, if you've disked about or broken up about a third of it, you've done what you're supposed to do. Hopefully that answers your question. The same holds for strip mowing, works the same way. It's just a different category. It's actually, you're changing the level of the grass. When you mow a strip, you got a little layer of low grass and you got a layer of tall grass. And that tall grass is shelter for the birds that are eating and playing around in the low grass. So you've provided supplemental shelter there. You can get 3 activities by mowing a big strip and disking in the middle of it. Now you got food in the middle and you got shelter on the sides. We do a lot of that. And so I've got plenty of examples if you want to maybe send me an email or ask a question later. Hope that helped.
Great. Next question. We are under 80 acres, mostly wooded, oaks and elms, surrounding properties partly wooded, predominantly pasture. Are we too small to do wildlife management for deer and turkey?
Oh, no. No. Now, what we would normally recommend, white-tailed deer, you're probably not going to manage a population of white-tailed deer on 80 acres, so you probably wouldn't make them your only target species, let's say. But turkey, absolutely. If we were going to write a plan on that property, we'd probably do it for small, small mammals, songbirds, small mammals, turkey, quail, and deer. So you have a kind of diversify, and the deer could be in there. They may not be your primary. What you don't want to do on a property like that is say, I'm only managing for white-tailed deer. Then you've kind of pigeonholed yourself into just doing white-tailed deer activities. And the county may say, well, you really don't have enough land to actually manage a population. You can manage those deer, like on our place. Ours, it's not that big, and white-tailed deer are in my plan. They're part of my plan, but it's actually controlling their numbers a little bit so they don't remove all the food for the other wildlife that are in my plan, the songbirds and the small animals and things like that. So it's not too small, certainly not too small to be in wildlife management, not too small to have an impact by any means. Just be mindful of the fact that you want to diversify those a little bit and have some kind of size appropriate species that move around less. Turkey is a great example. Turkey are certainly good. I'd say, add songbirds and small mammals in there, and you have a little easier time of it. You can use birdhouses. You can use, rather than, whatever the shelter might be, brush piles or something for turkeys. Hopefully that helps.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question. When does the annual report have to be supplied for Burnett County?
I knew I was going to get the question. I don't know. Some counties have different deadlines, and I don't know what Burnett County's is. I don't have that right in front of me. Avalon, if you will either remind me of that question or send me this person's information, I'll get them an answer to that. Most counties, April 31st is kind of the overarching annual report deadline, but every county, Hayes County is different, Gillespie County is different, Burnett County is different. I don't know off the top of my head what their requirement or what their deadline is. While we're doing this, I may be able to find out. So let's go on to the next question.
Got it. Next question. Can the deer feeders you use be battery operated?
Okay. It's a good question. Depends on what the battery's doing. They can be battery operated. You're technically a deer feeder or a feeder for supplemental food should not be a spin cast feeder, so technically battery operated. It needs to be free choice. It needs to be available to the animals all the time. So a corn feeder that's spinning out corn at a certain interval, every 8-12 hours or something like that for a minute, that's not food. That's not a supplement. That's a bait. A protein feeder or a turkey feeder or a large bird feeder that's available to the wildlife whenever they want to come and use it. The idea is that it's free choice. Now, I have seen situations where people have taken a battery powered, a spin cast feeder, put Milo or hen scratch or something like that in, and thrown out enough food that it's technically free choice. There's still food on the ground when the birds leave. It's not like they're coming and just eating what they need or eating what's there and then taking it all and leaving. So there are ways that it could work. The best bet, though, is to get a free choice feeder of some kind that's not going to spit out feed on a timer.
Got it. Can you define /retention?
I can. It means cut and brush and leaving it where it lays. Hang on, I'm trying to get an answer to that deadline question. So /retention is a fancy word for cut and brush and using it. Retention meaning I'm retaining that brush instead of burning it or throwing it away. An example is I've got a hillside on my property where we're clearing some cedar, And as we do, we know there's not a lot of grass, there's not a lot of root structure on that hillside. As we do it, we cut the cedar and we leave them laying on the hill. That's slash retention. The limbs that I cut off those cedars, I leave them laying on the hill, perpendicular to the slope, to where they slow the water as they're coming down. Another example could be, brush that's next to a stream, next to a creek or a washed out area, actually using that brush, letting it lay over into the stream and using that and retaining that brush. So that's it. Basically, it's just a fancy way of saying I cut it and I'm using it for something. Slash retention. I've lots of examples where us as a company, we've gone and done brush management for people on hillsides here in the hill country, that if you pulled all that brush off right away, all that soil that's on that hill, any that's left, would go away quick, because the water would hit it and it would all wash down to the bottom. Leaving that brush on the hillside helps a lot. That's what slash retention is.
Great.
Yeah.
How to treat mesquite and cactus and what chemicals to use.
Oh man, okay. That's where our biologists are best. Our biologist is Steve Parker. I'm not gonna try to guess at that. There are a bunch of different methods to do it. The actual poisons and the actual chemicals to use. I'll ask you to either call the office or email. You can email that, the Plateau Wildlife email address that's on here. You can email those questions to that website address and we'll get them to the right people and we'll get you an answer. I'm not that guy. I apologize. I could sit here and I've done it, but it's been a while. They changed chemicals. I could give you some names of stuff that I think we've used, but I don't want to make that mistake. Now, method wise, there are, for mesquite, there's a cut stump method where you cut the stump, you treat the mesquite stumps. There are foliar treatments that need to be done at a particular time of year. That's part of that timing of activities thing. You can refer back to that, or you can just call us and ask us. Same with prickly pear. There's better times of year to do it, and different ways to do it. So sorry, I don't have a definitive answer there, but please, that's a good one just to refer back to us. Either email us or call us and we can get you an answer.
Great. Is looking for animals at night with spotlight an activity?
Heck yeah. Yeah, as long as you document that you've seen an animal and you know what you're. So we do spotlight surveys where you actually, the spotlight deer surveys are very well known, very popular activities on larger ranches where it's more effective to find those animals at night by looking for their eyes rather than trying to find them during the day when they're bedded down and you can't find them, and they move around a lot more at night. So spotlight surveys are great. And spotlight surveys at night are fine for other animals, not just wildlife management, not just deer. So part of that survey activity, one of the things we do on our property is an overall just kind of an animal list, and we list the animals we've seen on the property. Sometimes it's raccoons at night. Sometimes it's bobcats at night. Sometimes we think it's going to be Sasquatch at night. There's no telling what you might see out there. But yeah, anything you do like that, as long as you document and write it down, and you kind of have a purpose for it, that one there fits into what I would call incidental observations. While you're out there on your property and you're finding things, you add those to the actual whatever survey you're doing that might be an actual methodological survey, or it has a method to it. You add that to those. So I'm doing a camera survey where I baited an area and animals are coming to it, and I'm documenting the animals that I've seen, and I'm also adding a list of the animals that I've seen while I'm just out there on the property. So I hope that helps. But yeah, anything you see like that, there's a qualifying activity called incidental observations under surveys. And basically what they say is that you need to be able to document at least 100 different sightings. So that can be part of that. I put together every year, part of my survey method. I put together a long list of animals seen at the farm. And then I try to kind of look at that list every year to tell me, okay, am I seeing a bigger diversity or not? So hopefully that helps answer your question.
Awesome. How does this dovetail with those of us in the EcoLab program? And I have a kind of part 2 to that question from another one of our attendees. Should the people in the EcoLab program be working on a wildlife management plan with us for next year?
Absolutely. So good questions. And that's part of what we'll start focusing on here before too long is EcoLab. One of my dogs is fixing to go off here. So if you're in EcoLab, we have a number of people. We'll be communicating with you. We'll be contacting you if you need to move into wildlife management next year. So for folks that have been in EcoLab for 2 years, the following year, they need to move into wildlife management. So we have a group of probably 50 people, 30 to 50 people who 2021 is their year to move into wildlife management. A good thing for them to do is to go ahead and get their plan early, at some point this year, have the biologists come back out, write their wildlife management plan so they can get started early. So that's kind of, these activities are the thing that this is great to have those folks here, because these are the things you're going to need to do when you get into wildlife management. So, and you can do it as early as you want to. We always like to get those in early if we can, and not wait till after the beginning of next year to start doing Ecolab stuff. But understand, we will be communicating with you too. Certainly call us if you want to get started, get a jump on it. We can do those at any time. The wildlife management plans for the Ecolab folks. So, and that's how it does dovetail, because these are the things that, now that you're getting out of Ecolab, or if you just got into Ecolab, you need to be hearing this, because now 2 years from now, this is kind of what to expect. So this is good stuff to look at.
Great. Last question, I believe here, is the money spent on the wildlife management a write-off on your taxes?
Okay. No, I'm not an accountant. So no, in most cases is the easy answer. It's a more complicated answer to that. It really depends on whether or not you have a revenue stream or not. The money you spend on your traditional ag operations, that's a great question. We get it a lot. And it really depends on the landowner and what they're doing on their property and what other things they have going on. Technically, wildlife management expenses, there's no revenue stream associated with those. So you're not doing wildlife management to produce income. Where you were in traditional ag, whether it was farming or running cows or whatever it was, you had a business entity and you were doing that to produce income. And so you were able to write off those expenses. There are ways to make that work with wildlife management. There are folks that do, if you have a hunting lease of some kind, if you allow people to hunt on your property, or you rent a cabin, or you do a little bed and breakfast, or nature walks, or nature tourism, those kind of things, to where you do have some form of business entity, and the wildlife management activities are a part of that. So it can be done. Again, it's something that we can help with advice and guidance in that area, but we're not accountants. We're not your tax guy as far as your income taxes. And so that's a better conversation to have with your tax preparer, your accountant. But there are ways to do it, and there are properties that maintain both. Just because I'm in wildlife management on my property, but we still occasionally run some cows. We still have a cattle business. We still buy and sell some livestock here and there. So all of those things can tie together to where you can get the benefit of if I'm buying something for the livestock portion of the ranch, whether it's fencing or cattle troughs or things like that, I can still write off those expenses. I still get a sales tax break, those kind of things, because I'm still a producer. So hopefully that makes some sense.
Yep. And I've seen a couple of our attendees raise their hand during this presentation. I just want to remind you, if you need to submit a question, or if you have a question, just enter those in through our chat or Q&A boxes. Scroll over the screen and you can see on the bottom toolbar where you can select those options and just type in your question. I'll give y'all a couple of minutes in case you do have any questions last minute, but I think that might be it for today, Tim.
That's awesome. I can't thank everybody enough for being here. It looks like we had a pretty good crowd. And like I said, Avalon, I can't thank you enough for making this thing go so smoothly. I'm sorry about the little technical difficulty there. But again, I appreciate everybody spending the time with us today. And don't forget, if you're having any issues or having any concerns about wildlife management at all, that's why we're here. It's call us, whether we did your plan or not, and whether it's wildlife management or ag related or property tax related, whatever it might be, give us a holler. We're happy to talk with you and help you. That's a big part of what we do.
And I did have one last minute question coming in. So does ag and wildlife valuation run concurrently?
They're the same thing, basically. They don't necessarily, they can run concurrently. So ag and wildlife valuation, your ag exemption, your wildlife exemption, they're the same thing. What you have is a 1D1 open space valuation on your property, which means it's valued at a lower rate than a market value property because it's being used for some form of ag production. And in this case, your ag production is wildlife management. So all those things are kind of interchangeable. We're even prone to saying that you're going from ag to wildlife. You're not going from ag to wildlife. You're going from one form of open space, which was ag, which was traditional ag, baling hay, farming and doing cows, to a different form of open space, which is wildlife management. They're the same thing. Same tax valuation, same property taxes, everything stays the same. It's really no different than me telling the county I'm going from cows to goats, or I'm going from baling hay to planting oats. I'm going from cows to wildlife. So instead of managing livestock, I'm now managing wildlife habitat and managing wildlife. So they're not necessarily, we have that misunderstanding. We've had that misunderstanding before where somebody goes, well, I want to keep my cows because I'm not sure that this wildlife, I want to do them both. You can't technically do them both to the intensity that they need to be done. So if I've got enough cows on my property to say that I'm in the cattle business full time, and that's my ag activity full time, that's what I qualify with, then I'm technically not in wildlife management because I've got too many animals on the property. Now, in my case, we're in wildlife management and we keep a few cows, and that's okay. That's different. Wildlife management is my primary ag use. The cows are just a hobby. That's where most people fall in. The cows are a hobby. They don't really want to be doing that, but they need to because they need the ag exemption. They need the lower taxes. So they got a few cows and they may be running more than they want to because they feel like they have to. Wildlife management allows me to have wildlife be my primary ag use, but still be playing around with the other stuff too. So I hope that makes some sense. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. It's a very flexible program. There are properties. So when we first started ours, the front 30 acres was still in traditional ag. We were still baling hay on it. We had wildlife on the back half and hay on the front half, just two different forms of ag use. All of it in open space, the same open space, two different forms of ag use. So let's say I run a fence down the middle of my property. I want to put cows on one half of it and horses on the other half, or cows on one half and goats on the other half. I got two different forms of ag use on my property, where I'm baling hay on one half and I'm running cows on the other half. I got two different forms of ag activity on my property, but the valuation's the same. It's an open space valuation. So I hope that makes some sense. I know it's a little confusing when you start talking about that, but a big thing to me is that people understand this is it's not an all or nothing thing. You don't have to be all wildlife or all ag. It's a primary use thing. It's what is the primary use of my property. It was never, when it first came around, when wildlife management first came about, it was not designed to just take a property from running cows to going into wildlife. Most people didn't use it that way. It was designed to help a guy that had 10,000 acres and didn't want to have 1,000 head of cattle to be able to have 500 head of cattle and do wildlife management on the other side of his place. Because if he only had 500, he'd lose his ag exemption on half of it because he had to have 1,000 to qualify. That kind of thing. I know it's kind of confusing. Call and ask that question if you have any concerns about what you're doing on your property at all. We get that a lot of, can I still keep this? Can I do this? They don't necessarily run concurrently. You can't have, on the same piece of property, you can't have ag and traditional ag and wildlife. I can't be baling hay on my place and say that it's on this 30-acre pasture and say that it's in wildlife too.
Makes sense. And I do have a couple of questions about making this presentation available afterwards. So we are recording this, guys. I will be posting this to our website this afternoon. And then I will also be sending out an email tomorrow morning where you will have a link to this presentation and also a PDF of the PowerPoint here. And then one more thing, I think maybe she missed this question earlier, but would you mind just stepping back to strip mowing again, Tim, and explaining that one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an interesting one too. And these are great activities because they're things you can do yourself. If you have a tractor with a plow, with a shredder or a plow, you can strip mow, you can strip disc. Strip mowing is a supplemental shelter activity. You're basically taking a grass pasture. Let's say it's in my coastal field where I used to bale hay. I'm going to mow strips in it. I'm going to mow a couple strips and then I'm going to move over 3 or 4. And I'm going to mow a couple more and I'm going to move over 3 or 4. Or maybe you've just got a big a pasture area that has real tall grass in it. And rather than cutting the whole thing, you mow a third of it. What you're doing is you're creating an edge. Wildlife love edges. So anytime I can create an edge, so if I look out and I've got this big open grass pasture, that's not real useful to wildlife. It's just a big open grass pasture. Not much is going to use it. But if I mow strips in it, little low green growth and other things are going to grow in that bottom part and the mowed part. And it's also easier for them to move around in the mowed part. And then if something comes along and they need to get away from it, they can scoot off into the taller grass. And that's why it's supplemental shelter. So it's really, it means mowing a third of an area is what strip disking or strip mowing is. Strip disking would be disking a third of that area as a food activity. But for supplemental shelter, it's just mowing a portion of an area to provide more edge and to provide more shelter.
Thank you, Tim. I think that might be all of our questions today. Again,
Well, good.
everybody, be expecting an email from me in the morning that will include the link to this recording and also the PDF presentation. And feel free to respond directly back to that email with any questions that you may have or we might have missed today. We're happy to answer those. You can also give us a call at our main number listed here.
Very good, very good. I appreciate everybody, like I said, and if the person that asked the Burnett County question is still around, it's usually March 15th or March 30th is their deadline for the Burnett County annual reports. We've got a big, long list of those things. I just didn't have them here in front of me. So if you're wondering, does my county want an annual report? Do they need an annual report? When's it usually due? That kind of thing. You can call us and ask us, and we'll let you know what we know. And we're always calling the counties and checking with them to find out what kind of updates they might have in that regard. So, all right, that's it. That's all I got.
All righty. Thank you, Tim. And again, y'all will be expecting an email from me shortly.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Okay.